Welcome. This is the little issue that could, debugging and contributing patches on Drupal.org. This is a beginner level talk, so if you've already contributed something, if you've already written a patch, there's still time. You could go to another session. Otherwise, thank you for being here, and let's get started.
Shut the door?
Sure. Go ahead. Okay, so why am I giving this presentation? Well, I found a bug, and I thought other people might find a bug. It's Drupal, it's open source software, these things happen, and I wanted to document the process of what happened after that. So I was working for a client, and they needed to add credits to photos. So we decided to try the file entity module, which lets you add fields to files like images. So we would be able to add a credit source field to all images, and then the client would be able to edit the image and attribute the source for that. So I took a video of this bug in action. It's a little hard to describe, but basically we also, the client needed to add links and formatting to the attribution. So we added a CK editor field to the file entity. And the bug is when you edit the file and you try to make something a link, then weird stuff happens. As you can see, kind of the file entity pop-up goes away, disappears, and we see the link pop up, but then when we hit save, nothing happens. And if we X out of it, then also it looks like nothing happens. And if we go back to edit the file, it looks like nothing we had was saved. So this is weird. This is unexpected. This is the bug. We are going to go over how it got fixed-ish. So you found a bug. Now what? Well, there are some things that I usually do anytime this happens. The first one is you should try the dev version. Most people will just download the most stable release and not even look at how old that is. So this is my favorite example of a popular contrib module for Drupal 7. If you download the stable version, it's 4 years old and it's 78 commits behind. And it actually won't work. You have to use the dev version. So if you just try the dev version, it could be that your issue is fixed and then you're done and the talk will be over. That wasn't the case for me. So the next thing you would want to do is search the issue queue. Has somebody else had this problem? This is the advanced search for the file entity, and every contributed module on Drupal.org has an issue queue. If you look in the sidebar, there's a little link that says how many issues there are, and there's a search field. If you go into that, you'll see all the issues that have ever happened, and searching is easy. You just put in a keyword. Here I searched for a lot of stuff. I searched for pop-up, CK editor, Modal, all kinds of things. Also, for the status, by default, it only searches open issues, but you would want to search all issues because potentially it has already been fixed, and so you want to see if that has been fixed. So search for all issues there. And then also the version. We're in Drupal 8. This bug is in Drupal 8 file entity, and probably a lot of stuff has changed. They rewriting some stuff. So you might want to focus your search to Drupal 8 in this instance. For me, I didn't find an issue, but potentially there would be one. So you might find an issue, and maybe somebody has already posted a patch, so you could apply the patch and maybe it gets fixed, and that's cool, but that's not what happened to me, so that's not what I'm going to cover here. But there's documentation on how to do that kind of stuff. For us, we didn't find an issue, or if you found an issue, like somebody else reported the problem, but there is no patch, this would also apply. So rejoice. This is why we are programmers. We get to fix things. And I'm happy when things are broken forever. No, not really. So the first thing I hope you do, even if you don't continue past this at all, is please create an issue. This helps validate other Drupal developers. If they find a bug, they want to know that they're not the only one. And so, God bless you if you create an issue. Even if you quit forever, that's fine. That's awesome. Some things you want to keep in mind for creating the issue is, hey, don't forget to create the issue. It's important, please. The next thing is be as specific as possible. You want to have very good reproducible steps. You want to say, this is a bug with this module and Drupal core. It's not as helpful to say, well, I had this bug and here are the 200 other modules I have installed. I don't know what the problem is. So if you can, get to as small of a subset of reproducible steps as you can. We also have a very good Drupal.org documentation page, how to create a good issue. So here is the example of one I created. And also, because it was kind of hard to explain, I recorded that screenshot and I uploaded it to the issue for the maintainer. Here is my issue. I have steps to reproduce, which hopefully are very easy to follow and reproduce. And then also I attached the video. Okay, you've created an issue? Yes, question?
Yeah, just a question on the category.
Yep.
You made an issue. You assume there is a bug somewhere, but you don't really know. And it could be something else. And I wonder if the category that you have the issue with is determining who's going to read that issue first.
Yeah. So the question is, I'll repeat for the recording, is how does the category affect, like maybe what gets fixed first, or how do you pick the category? There are different categories. You have bug report, feature request, and some other things. In my opinion, this isn't super important. If you get it wrong, nobody's going to hate you for it. If you expected something to happen and that didn't happen, in my opinion, that's a bug. It could be a bug in code, it could be a bug in documentation, it could be a bug somewhere else, but if you had an expectation, then the module developer set things up for that expectation. And if it didn't happen, then that's a bug. The other one, like feature request, is if something you want to do, you can't do. That's a feature request.
I found if I declare it a bug, it doesn't get as fast a response as some other categories, especially support requests, which seems to be read by some top senior developer or something like that in the team of that particular module.
Yeah.
Support request is more like, well, I don't know what this is about.
Right, so support request you could use, like, if you read the README and you still don't know what to do, right, you could say, hey, I need help, I don't understand how this works. But also, that could be a bug. You could create a bug, improve the README, because I don't understand how this works, right? So, I generally don't search based on category. Like, if you're trying to search for what other people have posted, I just say, show me all categories. But for the module maintainer, it is more helpful, so, pick what you want. You got questions? Nope. Okay, so what do we do after this? Well, we just wait for somebody else to fix it, right? If you don't know how or you don't know where to start, this is where a lot of people quit. They report a bug, or they don't report a bug, and they just don't use the module anymore. They try to find another solution. That's fair, but it can be intimidating, but I think you can do more. You can actually fix things, and you should go for it, and that's what this talk is about. So, how do we fix, this is now the debugging part, how do we fix this bug we found? It's important to narrow your focus. There in Drupal 8.3 as of yesterday, and this is not a scientific count, but there are 1.5 million lines of code, there are almost 17,000 files, and 7 different languages. And when you found the bug, it could be in any one of those places. So we need to ask, well, is it a front-end bug? You know, this could be like a link is overlapping another link, or a background image isn't showing, or styling problems. It could be if you have JavaScript errors, or your CSS doesn't show up. Those are all kind of front end, and that's half of Drupal. It could be back end, PHP warnings or errors, white screen of death, all those things. Those are relatively easy to see because the browser tells you, hey, there's an error, there's a warning, and it's front end or back end. Sometimes it's not so easy. Let's look at our bug again. What do we think? Is this front end or back end? Well, we're doing some pop-up things, right? The page is changing without a page refresh. So that means JavaScript stuff is happening. We get the little like spinner in the middle of the screen. That usually means Ajax for Drupal. So that's JavaScript, but also PHP because Ajax has to communicate with the server. It's a little unclear in this case, maybe. Are we front end or back end? So let's just assume front end because it looks more front end to me, the pop-ups and whatnot. So that's where we're going to start. We're going to start in front end. So the first thing we want to check, since we know some JavaScript is happening, is we want to check if there are any JavaScript errors. And you can do this with the web developer tools. This comes in all of the browsers. The web developer tools has a lot of stuff in it. You can like inspect the HTML, you can run JavaScript, you can look at the network requests. There are a lot of things it can do for you. We're only going to cover a small subset because these are the things that I use specifically for this bug. So right now, we're on the console tab. As you can see here, we're on the console tab. The console tab is all JavaScript. The most important thing it tells you is if there were any errors while the page was executing. We can see here that there are no errors, which is unfortunate. If there was an error, this would be easy. The console can also let you execute JavaScript on the page. We're not really at the point where we even know what to try to execute, so that's not very useful. So what next? We're still trying to figure out front end or back end. So we didn't see anything obvious in front end. So what about back end? We can check the recent log messages in Drupal. That would tell you if there were any problems, like in any modules or file uploads or any of that kind of stuff. Here we have no log messages, so that doesn't tell us anything. So we still don't know. Still don't know. So let's try to find some clues. We still need to figure out how to narrow our focus. So the next thing I usually look at when I'm not familiar with how this thing works, like the pop-ups in Drupal 8, is let's look at the HTML. Let's look at the source code. What is getting output? Because that usually will give you clues to, well, what module is it in? Is it in a template? All that kind of stuff. So this is now the Elements tab in Web Developer Tools for Chrome. And this shows you the live HTML DOM representation of the page. And you can inspect certain elements. And so here specifically, I've highlighted the add link pop-up. And in the right-hand column, the blue highlighted thing is that div And what I'm looking at here is we see div class equals UI-dialog, UI-widget, UI-widget-content, etc. UI corner, all these things. That's a big clue to me. Adding a class UI-dialog, that means something. Somebody added the class, and a dialog makes sense. This is a pop-up. Dialogs and pop-ups are usually synonymous terms. So this is where I'm going to start. Now I kind of know this is a dialog. Well, what is a dialog, and how is that working in Drupal 8? So let's do a code search. I'm just going to search all of Drupal for UI-dialog. This is PHP Storm. You can use any code editor for code searching. They all do this. In this instance, the preview is returning more than 100 results. That's a lot, but maybe we can clean this up a little bit. So this is the actual find dialog, and it breaks things up into keywords that it found in code, stuff it found in comments, stuff it found in other places. And I'm not actually looking at what was found, I'm just looking at where it was found. And the first thing I notice is web, core, assets, vendor, jQuery UI. So that tells me that these pop-ups are jQuery UI library. If you're not familiar with that, it's a UI library that provides things like pop-ups, sliders, accordions, all those kind of front-end things, and it is included in Drupal core by default. So we know this is a jQuery UI. It's safe to assume that jQuery UI itself is not broken because it's a third-party library. It's included in Drupal core, which means if jQuery UI itself was broken, then a lot of things in Drupal would be broken, and there would be a big issue, and this would be fixed. But also, if you remember, the first time we clicked edit and saw the file entity pop up, well, that was also a jQuery UI pop-up, and that worked fine. So it's probably not jQuery UI. But that does give us a clue of where else should we look. I'm going to ignore stuff like themes, Bartik, CSS. This isn't a CSS issue because when you click a button, the pop-up goes away. There's definitely JavaScript interaction here. It's not like a CSS, you just can't see the modal because it's hidden with CSS. No, there was interaction that was happening when the bug happened. So I can rule out CSS in that case. So I'm going to rule out all these things where it links to CSS. You can also rule out any folder that has tests in the name because that's not actual code execution. That's just testing. So we're not going to look at any of that stuff. So the only thing that's useful here, in my opinion, for this code search was that this is a jQuery UI. If we, let's see, did I skip a? No, so here I'm looking at specific. So we know we're ruling out JavaScript, and we know it's jQuery UI. But there are a few things in here that are JavaScript files that I just want to peek at. So like we have a dialog.ajax.js, and it's doing stuff with the class UI dialog. And we have some other JavaScript files. Is this where our bug is? If you look at the code, this just gives you the single line of code that was using the class. Most of these are finding the UI dialog or like removing it or adding a class. And none of them are specifically for UI-dialog. They all are, dialog-title bar or whatever. So none of the code here that I see is the thing that actually opens the dialog. So these JavaScript files I'm also, for now, not interested in. So we're narrowing things down. We know it's not potentially anything with the UI dialog. So that wasn't super helpful. We're remembering that this is all jQuery UI. So we're going to go back to the Elements tab, and we're going to look for more potentially interesting things. And this one I've highlighted because it has div ID equals Drupal-modal. That's a very specific ID. It's something that you're not going to find in jQuery UI. It's something that's going to be in Drupal itself. This is a kind of flag in my mind. This is a searchable string. We can probably find some other stuff related to this. So we're going to go back to code searching, and this time we're going to look for Drupal-modal. And here, instead of the 100 plus results, we only found 12. That's much more reasonable, much more smaller things to look at. But unfortunately, we still have PHP and JavaScript. We still haven't really narrowed front end or back end, but we're getting there. So here we have some PHP. It's all in the Drupal core Ajax. And that's interesting. But we also have, again, the dialog.ajax.js file, which it does, if you look on for line 29 for that, it's creating that element that we saw in the previous slide, div ID equals Drupal-modal, and it's appending it to the body. So here, that's very interesting to me. Now we're getting closer to what's actually creating the modal. So let's look at that file itself. This is the Drupal.behaviors.dialog.js. I still don't know how any of this stuff works. I'm looking for keywords. I'm looking for little hints, little clues. So on line 29, we see where it creates the element. And the other thing that sticks out in my mind here specifically is line 25, where it says if Drupal-modal.length. So that's jQuery, and that's checking to see if that element exists. That ID is hard-coded into this JavaScript file. Drupal is designed to be very modular, very do whatever you want. You very rarely find hard-coded IDs anywhere because a lot of things have to be generated on the fly, and you never know what they're going to be. So this is very suspicious to me. I'm going to keep that in the back of my mind some more. But the rest of this, code-wise, I don't see anything obviously wrong. I don't really know what it's all doing, but just reading it logically, it's not clear to me what the problem could be. But did you notice that I hid all the comments on the last screen? And I did that for a reason, and that's because a lot of people don't read the comments. It's important though, especially for this example, because in this comment on line 24, it says, non-modal dialogues are responsible for creating their own elements since there can be multiple non-modal dialogues at a time. That sentence is very interesting to me. The author went to the trouble to specifically say that non-modal dialogues can have multiple at one time. That implies that modal dialogues cannot have more than one at a time. If we think back to our bug, we had a modal dialog that was the file entity form, and then we clicked the link button, and the file entity form went away, and the link form came up. That's two modal dialogues, and by this comment, you can't have more than one at a time. In my mind, this is now where I think I know what the problem is. Is everybody following along? Does that make sense? Okay. Notice we still haven't gone into any fancy, you don't need a step debugger or anything. We're just reading code, looking for some keywords. Here, now I know what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the thing that specifically does the modal stuff, because you can't have two modals at one time. In my mind, that's my opinion, that's what I think so far. And then also, this is tying back to the hard-coded ID Drupal-modal here ties back to the ID that we found in the HTML. So if we just continue reading down this file, these things didn't appear in our code search, but it's the very next function. Excuse me. We see this Ajax, this JavaScript command, and the comment clearly says command to open a dialog. Well, that's what we've been looking for. We've been looking for the thing that creates the dialogues. The stuff that, the clues that I'm looking for here, we have a lot of things that are talking about Ajax, and we know that there's Ajax happening on the page because we saw the little spinner. Reading this, I don't see anything obviously wrong either, and there aren't any comments that tell us that there's anything wrong, but we know Ajax, and we know that this is the open dialog, and open dialog happens over Ajax. So we think there's Ajax. Can we just verify that we have Ajax happening? Let's go back to the browser. This is now the network tab in the web developer tools. The network tab will tell you every network request that happened for this page. So if you open the network tab and you load the page, you'll see the original HTML requests, you'll see all the JavaScript requests, you'll see all the CSS requests, and here we're specifically interested in JavaScript requests. So we're going to open the network dialog, we're going to filter by XHR, that stands for cross HTTP requests. That's the official name for Ajax. And then we're going to repeat the bug. And when we repeat the bug, we see that there are 3 requests, and that tells us that there's 3 Ajax things happening. So even if we didn't see the spinner previously, this can tell us for sure, yes, there's Ajax happening. So we have a theory that things are using modal dialogues, and there can't be more than one modal dialog open. Well, can we confirm that the file entity module is using modal dialogues? So we're going to do another code search, but instead of searching all of Drupal, we're just going to search the file entity module, and we're going to search for anything with the word modal in it. And here we get 6 occurrences, 4 of them in code. And if you look at number 114, we see new open modal dialog command. So obviously, file entity is using modals, but this is weird because this is a PHP file, not JavaScript. And you see that it's returning a new Ajax response. So here is where I do a little hand waving, and I say, with a little bit of Googling and a little bit of reading the Drupal.org documentation, and a little bit of, I don't remember exactly what steps I took, you can find out that the Ajax API in PHP can interact with the JavaScript API on the web browser. So what you do is you have all these Ajax commands that you build in PHP, and when you send those commands back to the browser through Ajax, the JavaScript will execute those commands. And so you have 2 parts. You have the part in the JavaScript where we had the Drupal.ajax command, which was the open dialog command. And you have this part in PHP, which is the new open modal dialog command. We are pretty sure we know what's happening. You can't have more than one modal at a time, and file entity is using modals. Let's try and fix it. We have a theory. So what do we do? How do we fix it? Well, let's look at the open modal dialog command code. It turns out it's very small. It's only 35 lines. Most of it is comments. And we can see that it extends the open dialog command. And in the constructor, we see that same hard-coded ID that we've seen in other places, pound Drupal-modal. So if we read, we then open the dialog command class and read some of that documentation. I'm back to fixing it. So if we read the documentation for open dialog command, we see that the first thing to the constructor is the selector, the selector of the HTML that the command is going to insert the code into. And so this makes sense that we have a hard-coded selector here and a hard-coded selector in JavaScript and a hard-coded selector in the HTML. So every time you do a modal command, it replaces the content in this exact same constructor. So we get the modal disappears every time you open another modal. So we're going to fix this by this is now the code in file entity module. So on line 114 is what we're interested in. It says add command new open modal dialog command. We're just going to replace this right now with new open dialog command, and we just passed the selector hard-coded. This is the exact same thing that it was doing in the constructor, but we're doing it manually, and then we test. And everything breaks the way we expect, but not in the way we didn't expect. So we're on the right track. The next thing we want to do is we don't want a hard-coded selector because we want a new dialog every time. So we're going to change the selector to a dynamic selector, and here I just chose to append the file ID, because this is the file entity module, and every file is going to have a different ID. This guarantees that we're going to have a different selector every time you open a file entity modal. And then if we test this, we open the file, edit the file, and if we try to add a link, we get a modal on top of the file entity modal. And our C category gets saved. And if we can save, we can then save the file. And if we edit the file, we see that our link stays there now. So we now have a fix. This is fixed for us. A lot of other people can and will quit here. You just commit this to your code base. You write a note, never ever update file entity ever again, and you go on with your life. Your client's happy, you're happy, everything's good. But you don't have to quit there, right? You wrote an issue. Other people are potentially going to have the issue. So let's create a patch. Let's contribute back to Drupal.org. We have some good documentation called submitting patches, but essentially you do need to do some extra stuff, right? Most module maintainers will want you to follow the Drupal code standards. Potentially, you're going to have to add or create new tests because you don't want this to break in the future. You'll want to run all of the other tests to make sure your one line of code didn't break something else. And then you need to actually create a patch. So the easiest thing to do for all of these steps is use Git to create patches. Here we edited the file controller module, and Git tells us, hey, this file has changed. And if you do a git diff, it tells you exactly which line's changed. Well, you can just redirect the output of that to a patch file, and that's all you need to upload, and everything's great. So we can look at the patch file, and you can see that I changed a little more than the 2 lines of code that we changed. Specifically, we also want to send the close dialog command instead of the close modal dialog command. And because both of those are classes, we need to change the use statements to make sure the namespaces match. But it's still a very relatively small patch. The most important thing was lines 20 and 28. We then want to run the tests for all these to make sure that we didn't break anything. The easiest thing to do is to just upload it to the issue and set it to needs review. And the Drupal.org quality assurance infrastructure will run all the tests for you. If you're contributing to Drupal core, this can take like 30 minutes-ish, because there are a lot of tests. If you're contributing to a contrib module, it could take less, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. But you don't have to set up all your testing infrastructure on your computer. You can let Drupal.org handle all that for you. Potentially, it'll come back as a failure, and you might need to fix things. And that's where the last step comes in. Follow up as needed. The whole, upload a patch and then go away is okay, right? At the very least, if somebody else came along, they would be able to apply the patch and maybe it gets fixed. And that was way back in the beginning of our steps where, hey, you found an issue and it has a patch. Well, why isn't it fixed? If you have an issue and it has a patch, why isn't it fixed? Well, potentially nobody's followed up, right? There's an issue, it doesn't follow code standards, test failed. So it'd be great if you can follow up as needed. So here is where I have to take a little detour. I fixed this and I submitted the patch, and my plan was to take you all the way through where that status got to the fixed state, but that never happened. So instead, I'm going to show you what happened on another issue. This wasn't a bug, this was an improvement I wanted to make. But it's a better example of how you follow up and how that process looks like. This is a issue for the facets module, and I uploaded the patch and I created the test, but there were a lot of test failures. So this is the whole issue. There were 30 something comments back and forth. The maintainer comes in and says, hey, this looks great, but we need a test. So I say, awesome, I can write a test for you. Write that, you upload it. It says, hey, this looks great, but it failed PHP 5. It's like, oh, that's a bummer. You go back and forth. You submit a bunch of patches to the test bot, and they all fail. And then eventually you figure out, well, there's a difference between PHP 5 and PHP 7 because the sorting algorithm has changed. Blah, 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 blah. You upload a patch, it passes, and then the maintainer says, okay, great. Reviewed and tested by the community. The next step here would be for the issue to get fixed. And then you can upgrade to the dev release because your fix will be there, or upgrade to the next stable release. You're happy, all of Drupal is happy, your clients are happy. You spent a little extra time, but you helped the whole community. For this specific issue, we still never went into advanced debugging techniques. A lot of people will suggest, oh, you need a step debugger like Xdebug, or you need to debug all your JavaScript code. That is extremely helpful in a lot of cases, but the most important part, in my opinion, is narrowing your search. And step debuggers don't help you narrow your search as much as the other things. The step debugger is when you find the issue, but you don't know why it's broken. You need to step through the code and understand the logic. This was a relatively easy issue. We didn't need to do stuff for that. However, there are a lot of other talks on debugging Drupal 8 that go into more detail of how those tools work, but not how you use those tools to fix an issue. That's what I wanted this talk to be, was how did I actually fix this issue? We have a lot of great documentation on Drupal.org. Another talk on debugging techniques talks a lot about web tools and other things. Lots of good talks. Look at any of the old DrupalCon sessions, that kind of stuff. Any old Backgap sessions, you'll find them. And that's it. Any questions? Yes?
You made a comment about setting a test case up or creating something about a test. Can you talk about more what that involves?
Yeah, so Drupal, so the question was, what does creating a test involve? Drupal 8 has a lot of testing things. You have like unit tests and integration tests. Simple test is there, but it's going away. You have a new JavaScript web test. Basically, all that boils down to is this bug that you found. You want to make sure that changes in the future don't also break the bug. So for ours, we would want to do an integration test because it all happens in the browser probably. And essentially, you're just writing code to test the code that you wrote. It can be tricky. If you've never written tests before, it's tricky. It's hard to wrap your head around. But all the documentation on Drupal.org is pretty good. And the maintainers will help, most of the maintainers will help you step through if you get stuck somewhere. The harder part is running the tests and running them consistently the same way that Drupal does. And so that's where if you write a new test and you include it in your patch and you upload the patch to the issue, the Drupal quality assurance infrastructure will run your tests as part of all the other tests. That's very helpful. Any other questions? Yes?
So after a patch has passed testing, what happens after that? How do you know then when it makes it into either the dev, or which does it go into? Does it go into dev or does it go into the stable release? And how do you know when it's there? And also if you're on an issue and you want the patch and it says it's submitted, how do you know where to then find it?
Good question. So the question is, if there is a patch and it gets fixed, how do you know if it gets in the dev release or when does it go in stable, stuff like that. So the issue status, like needs work, needs review, reviewed and tested by the community, fixed, all of those things are just metadata. It doesn't actually mean whether something made it into the code. But Drupal.org, when a maintainer actually commits something to the project and they include the issue number, then Drupal.org will add a new comment that says committed blah on blah date, and it gives you the commit message. So if you see an issue that has that comment says this has been committed on this branch, then for every new commit, the dev release will be re-rolled in a couple hours after the commit. It happens, I think, every 12 hours if there's a new commit. So usually what you can do is you can look at the date on the issue, when was it set to fixed, and look at the date on the dev release. If they're the same day or the dev release is the day after, chances are high that your issue is in the dev release. The most finite, the most definite, the best way to check is also in the sidebar on every contrib module. There's a link that says repository viewer. That takes you to the Git repository UI, where then you can look at the log and you can actually see every commit that was made. If you see your issue number in there, then you know that your commit is in the code. And if the date on the dev release is later than the date of the commit, then your fix, your patch, is in the dev release. If on the repository viewer, it also will show you the tags. And the tags is where the stable releases come from. So if you see that the most stable release tag is on a later commit than your issue commit, then it's in the stable release. But also usually if the date of the stable release is later than the issue date, then it's going to be in the stable release also. And all that on the maintainer, they're the ones that actually do the commit. It's not like Drupal.org that does it automatically. So there is potentially you do have to wait for contributor for the module maintainer to actually commit the patch.
So if you're working on a module that has a number of people that are working on fixes with Git, how do you sort of keep that workflow coordinated? Because if you have a number of different, whatever somebody else might do is going to break the thing back and forth.
Yeah, that's hard to do. That happened on this last issue I was working on. I fixed all the tests. However, there was an update to Drupal.org or to Drupal core that broke other tests. So now my tests don't pass because other tests failed because Drupal core got updated. How do you manage all that?
This next thing is here, just you and I are working on the same contrib, and then we're doing different things. And
on different issues?
Yeah.
So, if some contrib modules are big, and potentially we're working on two things that aren't related, right? You're playing with JavaScript and I'm playing with PHP. Our patches are never going to conflict, and so we can work in parallel and not have to worry about each other. That's not always the case. You won't know. It's hard to know until like my issue gets committed, and then they go to your issue and try to commit it, and there's a conflict. Well, at that point, the maintainer is going to say, sorry, there's a conflict, can you fix this? And then it's your job to, whoever was unfortunate to be the last one, it's their job to fix the conflicts.
So it's the maintainer's responsibility to keep track. at that point, there's sort of the
Yeah.
controller.
Yeah.
Because what happens if somebody just didn't see that you already made that patch and they go ahead and do it again, they just do it a little differently. So they got sort of two versions, sort of fixing the same sort of thing, and then that kind of thing.
Yeah, the maintainer might know because they'll read the issues and they'll be like, hey, this is the duplicate. They'll close your issue and say, work on this over here. But, I've seen issues where an issue was opened like 3 years ago and nobody ever fixed it. And then somebody else opened a new issue because like the keywords, they just didn't search for the same keywords. And as a maintainer myself, I'm not going to remember an issue from 3 years ago. So usually at that point, the new issue gets committed and the old one just goes away forever. But yeah, the Git helps you manage that because it's going to tell you, oh, there's a conflict. But then also the maintainer helps you manage that. Is that a question? Yes.
Yeah, just to follow up on your question about how to know what happens after you submit your patch. I know a lot of people don't know about the follow button, so if you follow the issue, on your dashboard you'll get notified every new comment on the issue, and you'll get emails, so you'll know when it was sent to fix just by following the issue.
Yeah, on every issue, just underneath the sidebar, there's a follow button. So you can follow issues even if you haven't commented on them. Yes.
Is it important to test your patch on a clean install? I'm assuming you're doing the work on your website, whatever you're working on, and you have a bunch of other stuff going on. Or is that?
Yes. Well, so the question is it important to test on a clean install? Absolutely. However, your clean install can be the Drupal.org QA infrastructure, right? If you write all your tests and you run them locally in your website and everything passes, that's good enough for me to upload it and let them run the tests also. And that can be your clean infrastructure. If you want faster iteration, you can do it locally, but then let the QA infrastructure handle that. Any other questions? Okay, thank you all for coming. Appreciate it.